You've been deadlifting wrong for far too long. Let's go. Step one in learning how to deadlift is learning how to properly hinge your hips. So I want you guys to grab something super light. I have a PVC pipe here, mobility stick. You can grab a super light dumbbell or a super light kettlebell or just use body weight. So let's talk about this. We're gonna look at this from the side. A hip hinge is when you literally are just pushing your butt behind you and backwards as your chest falls forward, okay? So now let's get a little more technical with it. You're basically learning how to do a stiff leg deadlift or an RDL. If you've heard those terms before, that's what a hip hinge is. So a little bend in your knees, that's all you're trying to do, a slight bend. That's all I want you to have. And from here, all you're moving is your hips and your upper back. So pushing your butt behind you as I'm holding this bar or your dumbbell or your kettlebell or your hands in front of you, as that chest comes forward, your butt should be pushing behind you. So when you get into this position, you're gonna feel your chest and your back almost parallel to the ground. Your eyes are gonna be at the floor and your butt's gonna be back. And a good cue here to know you're in a good position is if you can feel those hamstrings sort of stretching, right? They're under tension, they're under stretch. So that's number one. So let's go through it again. Little bend in the knees, you have your hands out in front of you, and you have to really develop that trust to let your chest come way forward as your butt starts to go back and behind you. Again, you have that slight break in the knees and you're feeling that stretch on your hamstrings, and that's step one, learning how to get into this position. Okay, now that you got the hardest part out of the way, the second one is really not too bad. We're gonna learn how to keep our spine in a little better position in that hinged position. So as we go down, a lot of us are gonna round that spine a little too much, right? We don't wanna be rounded when we're deadlifting, but we also don't wanna over-exaggerate the opposite way into too much extension. So what you guys wanna feel is not a neutral spine, not a dead straight spine, a slight extension, meaning we're gonna try to arch your back slightly as you get into that hinge position. So what you're gonna feel is that chest almost lifted a little bit, which is also gonna help us get a little more stretch on those hamstrings. So as opposed to being here, step two is learning how to be slightly extended and arched in that spine, in that hinge position. Okay, we got the first two steps out of the way. Step three is actually knowing what a conventional or regular deadlift is. We're still sticking with our light kettlebell or our PVC pipe or dumbbell. Now, we learned how to hinge. We got into this position. We learned how to extend our spine in this position. The only difference in teaching you how to get into a regular deadlift is bending those knees slightly more. Now, I don't want you to bend your knees over your toes here. We're trying to sit back slightly and bend those knees as we sit our butt down a little bit more. So if you see me here, this is a normal start to a conventional deadlift position. I'm not way here like we did in our hinge before, right? That's our stiff leg deadlift or RDL position. Now I'm in my conventional by just slightly sitting back. So let's go through this together. First, let's hinge. We'll do step one, pushing the butt back. But now add step two, extend that spine slightly as we're in that position. So now I'm in that stiff leg deadlift or RDL, and now I'm gonna just drop that butt a little bit more. And now I'm in my normal conventional deadlift. It's not as extreme as our hinge or stiff leg deadlift that we worked on before. Now, let's stand all the way up and let's try just a couple reps with the PVC pipe or light weight. Let's just bend those knees as we push that butt back slightly in that extended spine. And look, we end up right in that conventional deadlift. Now let's stand up and finish it. Stand up all the way, the bar stays close to the body. So again, we start always with the hinge, but now we're adding a slight little extra sitting back and knee bend into that position, and that brings us down into a perfect deadlift starting position, and then we could stand up and finish. Now let's have some fun and we'll get to the barbell. Okay, next step is just graduating to a barbell with some weight on it, okay? So all we're gonna do before we get into the technical stuff is work on the position that we just got into with the PVC pipe. So same exact deal. Let's pretend we have the PVC pipe in our hands, the bar is on the floor. We're gonna pretend we're reaching into that hinge position. But what did we do to get into that conventional? We slightly added that knee bend in to reach down for the ground. So now, we know this position, we're comfortable with it, but now we got some weight in front of us, right? So all I want you guys to do is understand this position first before we get to those technicals. You have your conventional deadlift set up, and as you stand up, You're here, you have that bar right in front of you, right? I'm not leaning on my lower back, none of that. So now let's just work on getting up and down with some weight in our hand. Again, start with that hinge, and as you hinge with that extended spine, you're gonna slowly bend those knees a little bit, and that brings us right down to where we started before. So one more time, lift up all the weight, control it down, pushing your butt back, extend it slightly on that spine, bending those knees a little, and now you guys are comfortable with understanding at least where you should be in that deadlift position. Now let's get down to some specifics. Okay, now the technical stuff comes in. The first one is learning how to take the slack or tension out of the barbell before we lift it up off the ground. This can be very challenging for a lot of people, but it's one of the most important steps so you don't get that lower back involved too much and injure yourself. So you wanna get down towards that bar in that same position that we worked on. Before you even lift the bar off the ground, I want you to feel this little bit of slack. So you're gonna jiggle that bar. Most barbells have this, some may not, but a lot of them will, which is right here. You hear that little clicking action here? I'm not lifting the bar off the ground. There's just a little bit of space between the bar and then the end and the top part of that barbell that you need to pull out before you lift that bar off the ground. So I hope you guys can hear that. We're gonna pull that bar into us just like we did earlier, and we're gonna first get into that deadlift position, and we're gonna slowly pull that slack out right there. And now let it release. Again, you're gonna put your butt down in that deadlift position, pull that slack out, and release. So now you're learning how to at least get a little bit of that out of the bar. Step 2 after learning to slack out is actually lifting after we pull it out. So we pull that bar into us. You pull the slack out. Now I want you to hold it this time. Pull that slack out. You're nice and tense. And now you can stand up all the way and finish that deadlift. So now let's put it back on the ground. Take that slack out first. You're in your good conventional deadlift position we talked about to death just now. We're gonna pull that slack out and now stand up because you're nice and tense and finish. Perfect. Now let's put that bar down. The next thing we're gonna talk about is breathing with the slack. So you need to also be braced breath-wise, because if you're not, again, it's another little bit of an issue that can get into that lower back, which we don't want. We need to be tense when we're lifting this bar up off the ground. So again, you know your deadlift position. We know how to pull the slack out of the bar. Now you need to inhale and hold your breath as you take that slack out so you're tense in your abdomen. You don't wanna just take this big upper body, upper chest breath. You need to almost feel like you're inflating your stomach. You see when people wear those big belts, they inflate into those belts to keep tension. So let's go through it. We're in our normal conventional deadlift position that we know. We felt it, we understand it now. Let's pull the slack out first. Now take a nice deep inhale. Exhale at the top and finish your deadlift. Let's go all the way back down. Let's do it again. So slack, breath, lift. Here we go. Slack, take a nice inhale. Exhale at the top and finish. Awesome job. Okay, everybody, quick review. We are on our last step here, but first, we learned how to hip hinge. We learned how to slightly extend our spine. We learned how to take the slack out of the bar. We learned how to actually breathe and keep ourselves tense. Now we need to put all this together and finish our last step, which is finishing the deadlift. So when you stand up with that bar, I want you to feel as if your hips are going forward into it, not like you're trying to lift and extend backwards. You want to feel as that bar crosses your knees. This is your chance to really take those hips and drive them forward. So, want you to watch me on this first rep, then you guys can start to try to practice it at home. Again, let's go through all the steps. We're in our conventional deadlift position. We're gonna take that slack out. You're gonna take a nice inhale through the belly, and then as that bar crosses your knees, you're gonna drive those hips into the bar pretty aggressively. So, my slack is out. Inhale in, stand up, drive those hips into the bar. That's how you finish a deadlift. Obviously, this is not a super amount of weight here. We're not lifting anything crazy heavy, so it looks very explosive, right? But that's the type of feel that you want to finish the movement. It's very hard to not extend on that lower back when you do that, but that's the whole point. It's a challenging movement, right? So again, butt down, chest up in a good conventional position. Slack out, click is out. I take my breath in. I'm gonna start to lift as that bar crosses the knees. Watch those hips. Right into that barbell, and I stand up nice and straight to finish that deadlift. All right, everybody, that is it. Let's go over this really quick though. One last recap. So First movement, learning the hip hinge. Understand that and you will be so much better off getting into your deadlift position. That's number one. Number two, slightly extended spine like we talked about. Number three, we got down on the ground with the barbell and understood the actual conventional deadlift position where we bent those knees a little bit more than that stiff leg position. And then after that, we got into those technicals, taking the slack out of the bar. One of the most important and crucial positions is learning how to pull that out before you lift off the ground. And then breathing, getting your air into more of your stomach as opposed to just that upper big chest breath. Inhale through the stomach, expand your belly slightly, and brace. You need to be tight during this position so you don't get that into your lower back as much. And then last is finishing the deadlift. As that bar crosses over your knees, you wanna feel like you get those hips involved slightly. You don't wanna overextend your spine and shoot the hips forward, but that's how you finish. Don't think about finishing with your back, think about finishing with your hips. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope this helps you deadlift. And if you have any questions at all, leave them below. I'd be happy to answer you guys. Awesome job today.